Hello and welcome back to Get Around to It, the culture podcast for curious people, presented by me, Aoife Barry.
And me, Lauren Murphy. We're so delighted to be back and here in this lovely studio at TU Dublin for this special deep dive.
We definitely are. Don't forget, every second episode of Get Around to It is one of these special deep dives where we get to chat about all sorts of cultural topics. And on this special episode, we are asking the very pertinent question, why is Gen Z so obsessed with the show Girls? Plus, stick around to hear Lauren's top 5 shows about female friendship. That's coming up at the end of the pod.
But before all that, we've got a very special treat for you. We're going to open with an interview this time with Libyan Irish musician Farah Elle, who is playing the Dublin Fringe Festival. She's had a really fascinating upbringing. She was born in Libya, she was raised in Ireland, and her new show, which is called LIBYA, explores the duality of her cultural identity through music and storytelling. So I caught up with her to learn more about her show, which runs as part of the Dublin Fringe at Bewley's Cafe Theatre from September 16th to 20th. And she is also the Dublin Ambassador for Culture Night, which is on September 19th, and she's performing live at Woodkey on that day. And we also spoke, of course, about what she's gotten around to lately, and here's what she had to say.
Hello, my name is Farah Elle, and 3 things that I have gotten around to lately. Well, first of all, I have to start off with the current soundtrack to my life, which is Doechie's album Alligator Bites Never Heal. To be really honest, Doechie is like my alter ego. So I feel like that album just lets out a part of me that stays in a lot. So when I'm in my car and I've got it blaring, I get to let myself just fully get ready for wherever I'm about to go, or get things off my chest that need to be gotten off my chest. So big plug for that album. That was a well-earned award on her end. And then as far as maybe something I've been watching, so I was torn between mentioning Bear and actually this show called Couples Therapy. The reason I think I'm really enjoying Bear, it's about this chef who's running a restaurant, and I realised the thing I like about that show so much is it really encapsulates all the different aspects of mental health. Okay, so the fleeting moments of joy and bliss, and then the deep grief, and then anxiety and trepidation, and like anger issues, and it kind of really intensely captures it actually. In the sort of dynamic of running a restaurant. So, and each character I feel really represents different moods and mental states, so I love that. And then the reason why I think Couples Therapy is worth a little plug is because it's this show that is put together, and essentially it's actually it's based on real couples. You're watching them go through therapy. And the therapist, her name is Orna, really sits and holds kind of this really analytical space where she really allows the people to fully kind of be themselves, and you learn a lot about your own dynamics in relationships. You also learn a lot about yourself, and you're crying one minute, you're laughing, but you know, it also gives you faith, and it also is very raw. So I quite like that.
Okay.
You're really seeing people in the trenches, and it kind of gives you a sense of, okay, you know, I'm not alone in moments like this, and yada, yada, yada. So it's pretty good. And then the third one I would mention is a show called Mo on Netflix, and it's about a Palestinian man who moves to the States, and it takes you through his whole process of immigration. And honest to God, it's actually a comedy show, but it's probably one of the best series I've ever watched, and it's so amazing to watch as someone who also, if you can relate to it, if you're Muslim as well, that's kind of incredible because there's a lot of representation in it. But even if you're not, it gives you this really beautiful insight into just like an Arabic family who love each other but are also trying to integrate into a new society. And it doesn't really have an agenda either. It's just really beautiful and really honest. And he's just an incredible comedian, and he's actually coming to Ireland in a few weeks, and I'm going to go see his show, and I can't wait.
Excellent. They're all amazing recommendations for sure. And that seems like actually a good segue from Mo into your show, LIBYA, which is coming to Dublin Fringe from September 16th to 20th. I know you'll be performing at Bewley's Cafe Theatre. And I suppose a good place to start is why LIBYA and how that links into your own life.
I actually can tell you exactly where the title and the song even came from the get-go. And it actually started last year when I was part of this project called Nest in Driocht. And it was a show where we were essentially writing about other people, a young person's story that we were teamed up with. But before we could get to that part, we had to essentially do an exercise where we got our own story off our chest first before we tried to articulate someone else's. And I thought that was really powerful. And so the exercise we were given was to focus on 3 moments or 3 ages in your life that really shaped your life and had a profound impact on who you are now. So I chose the ages 4, 11 and 17. They were kind of 3 really big moments in my life that sort of stuck with me and shaped a lot of who I am. And the song LIBYA was essentially born out of this because it was the first time in my life where I wrote a song, a piece of music that wasn't using metaphors. It wasn't whimsical in its description of things. It was actually really direct to the point, like, this happened when I was 4. This happened at the age of 11. And it's really like, those are the literal lyrics in it. And I'm completely telling a true story about my life. And I think that was a nice moment and a turning point and an exercise for me, because there's something really vulnerable about doing that. And I'm already, music is kind of the space where I am probably the best at being vulnerable in my life. I think if you ask me to talk about my feelings, I get like all caught up and tossed up in a word salad. But if you ask me to put it in a song, I will really concisely tell you really well in 3 minutes. So this song, this piece, it's a lot longer than 3 minutes, but it really takes you on a journey. And so the show LIBYA was born out of that, because I decided, okay, so I'm giving you my story for the first time, really. I'm telling you directly about my life, rather than speaking in metaphors and relatable themes. It's more a moment where I can actually just let go of the past, but also let people know a little bit more about me that is quite direct. And then also a celebration of all of those moments and how we got here, and the deep gratitude that I have for my story, and how at the end of the day, everything we've been through, it's really important, and it all, amalgamates to create who we are, but also it's all just stories. Yep. So it's that sort of kind of gratitude and appreciation for that, but also a celebration of that. And even though my story might have very specific events, you might find pieces of it in your own life and reflections that feel relatable. And I think that's something I'm really passionate about, is that connection between people. And it's the whole reason why I do music in the first place. I think we can get really caught up in identity, and we can get really caught up in our own lives and our own stories. And that's totally fair enough. But at the end of the day, we're all not really that different underneath it all. So it's kind of like inviting you into my living room, giving you a cup of tea, having a really good chat, and hopefully leaving feeling refreshed and blessed.
It sounds fantastic. And speaking of cups of tea, actually, I know that it's billed as a kind of sensory experience. You're offering audience members cardamom, coffee and baklava. Is that true?
Yeah, because that's the stuff I would have grown up on. That's part of Libyan hospitality. Like, if you came to the house, you'd have been given coffee. You'd been also given mint tea, which I'm going to add to the menu. And Yeah, and like homemade baklava. We pronounce it actually baklava in
Right.
Libya.
My pronunciation is terrible, sorry.
No, you're fine. Everyone calls it baklava because that's how it's spelled everywhere. But we say baklava. But anyway, it's going to be, yeah, you'll be fed both spiritually and physically. So yeah, that's the plan.
Excellent. And you know, something you said there really struck a chord, because I think it's so important to have shows like this illustrating, as you put it yourself, like, you know, cultural duality, and how Irishness is, or someone's sense of cultural identity even, is not linear or easily defined. There's lots of different stories. And at the same time, it's a universal theme. Like you said, everybody's life is just a collection of stories, no matter where they're from or how they identify. So I think it's important to have shows like this available to people in festivals like Dublin Fringe.
Yeah, it was such a joy to be part of it. It's my first time doing Fringe Festival as well, and it just feels, it actually furthermore even validates my, you know, feeling of, oh, this feels important to share, you know, to be given that platform and to be given the opportunity to give that representation as well is a gift for me. So I'm delighted. I can't wait to share that gift with everyone else.
What's the message that you ultimately want to impart with this show? Why should people come to see Libya?
The message, to be honest with you, when you asked the question, the first immediate thing that came to my head, that like gut to mouth almost before you finished the question, was that you and I are not so different. But if I was to pick a word or a theme to entice people to come, it's really just for a sense of belonging and connection.
Great stuff. So lovely to hear from Farah Elle. What a voice she has. Truly talented. But welcome back to our deep dive episode on why is Gen Z so obsessed with girls. We're going to start off chatting about girls because if people were living under a rock, they might not know that Lena Dunham, who's the creator of the series Girls, which landed on our tellies and our screens in 2012, is also behind a new series called Too Much, which dropped on Netflix very recently. And it's about a young woman in her 30s, played by Megan Stalter, who moves from America to London and falls swiftly in love with an indie boy in London. So it's kind of like the grown-up version in a way of Girls, which is about 4 young women who were living in New York in the 2012s. You had Hannah, Shoshana, Jessa and Marnie. They were there. You also had their guys and their kind of guy friends and terrible boyfriends, Adam, Ray and Charlie. At the time when it came out, Lena was 26 years old. She had made a film called Tiny Furniture, and that ended up with her getting a deal with HBO to make the series. She kind of got that because she connected with Judd Apatow because he saw her film and thought she was brilliant. She managed to bring out the series then at that really young age on HBO, and it became a total phenomenon. Did you watch it, Lauren, when it came out in 2012?
No, I didn't watch it at the time. I have to admit, I kind of dismissed it, I'd say. You know, yeah, not in a bad way. It was mostly, I think, because Lena Dunham had said some very silly things, and, you know, I don't necessarily connect with her on a personal level. That's a nice way to put it. So I kind of dismissed it, you know. She was being heralded as this voice of her generation, and this series was so, you know, impactful and powerful, and I kind of decided not to watch it because that's the sort of person I am.
Classic critic, but don't watch it.
But you know, I decided to give it a chance 3 or 4 years ago, and I started watching from the beginning, and I was surprised by how much I liked it and how much I wanted to keep watching. It's so sharp. I watched the pilot again there recently before we were doing this episode, and it still stands up. Even 13 years on, it still stands up. You know, the characters are so great. They're so unlikable in so many ways.
They're terrible in many ways.
You're still rooting for them. And the character development across the seasons was great. You know, the storylines, the arc of the storylines, the acting was great. The writing was sharp. It was funny, really funny. And it still is funny. So yeah, I was a late bloomer, a late adoptee of Girls, but yeah, there are probably very different reasons to why Gen Z has taken it on board now 13 years later.
Definitely. And how we know Gen Z are kind of getting into Girls is because people are writing about it, talking about it. If you go onto the Girls, official Reddit page, I'm not sure if it's official, but it's the Girls Reddit page, for example, you just have so many people on it who are just starting to watch it or are just really into it. There's a really big podcast, which is a Girls Rewatch podcast. loads and loads of followers and listeners of that too. Lena Dunham was actually a guest on that, talking about her history with girls and the new series Too Much. On TikTok as well, you got plenty of people on there too. I think it's just a general idea of the series of girls appealing still to young people now, even though times are different, life is different in 2025. I think part of the key to it is that, you know, this was a game-changing show in 2012, and so obviously people are into telly and into following what women on the screen have done are going to go back and want to watch it anyway to see like what was the big fuss about. I also think though there is that resurgence, and I wasn't there, of that interest among Gen Z into millennial lives, our millennial lives. Who knew that they'd be interesting, right?
I knew it would happen someday.
I know.
Just not this soon.
I know. Into the like indie sleaze era. This was all happening around the time that girls came out, the indie sleaze era. You know, I saw an Instagram carousel yesterday where people were like, God, oh to be alive, you know, oh to be around in 2010 and all this music was coming out. You like Passion Pit and, you know, this band and that band. And I was like, wow, you know, there's something in that kind of era that's really appealing to Gen Z. And I think, like I was saying there, part of it is because they just have heard about this era and this show and it's really good. But I do think there's a massive nostalgia aspect to it.
For sure.
There's definitely nostalgia for us, right? You know, in rewatching it. Part of that, I think, is because Girls is set when the four characters, they're all in their 20s, they're just starting off their life and they crucially believe they're adults but make stupid decisions because they don't really know anything about life. And the series starts with Hannah getting cut off by her parents financially. I mean, did you find watching that it was kind of funny because that isn't a situation we'd be used to because we're not used to our parents bankrolling everything here in Ireland?
Yeah, that's the thing. Like, it's so unrelatable on so many levels because that is never and would never ever happen to me. But it was, you know, I think one of the reasons I did like it because it was relatable in other ways. You know, they're young women in their 20s. Even though I watched it later on, I could relate to the themes they were going through, the things they were doing with relationships, you know. And I suppose, you know, unlike something like Sex and the City, which I love as well, and I suppose was our generation's For Women in New York series, it felt more relatable in a way because Sex and the City was very much, you know, they were high-flying career women with very high heels that I could never walk in, and Christian Louboutins and
or afford,
and fancy restaurants, and Carrie somehow managed to make a living off one column. Lena Dunham's character Hannah is a struggling writer in a way that you could relate to, you know. She's trying to be a writer as well, but she's not living off one column a week in the New York Times or whatever. New York Post, New York Star.
New York Star.
That's what it was.
It's fake newspaper, is it?
Yeah. So I suppose it was a little bit more relatable in that way, and maybe that's the nostalgia element is a big aspect of it as well, for sure, for me.
And I think that part of that nostalgia element comes from the fact that these four characters were being written about by 26-year-old Lena Dunham, who, you know, grew up in New York with like artistic parents, lived this lifestyle, so knew a lot about kind of what was happening in that world. So she had it very realistic, but she also had the kind of more fantastical elements of it. But the greater world that Girls is taking place in is a pre-2016 world. And I always think back to how much life has changed since 2016. You know, since Brexit happened, Trump got into power the first time. Life actually, even though there was things like, you know, in the 2010s you did have some pretty, you know, horrifying terror attacks and things like that in Europe. But generally speaking, it felt like, particularly for women, a better time, that feminism was in a kind of a new era. There was the girl boss era, which, I mean, that was commodifying feminism, right? So that wasn't great. But it was this new era where it felt like, yeah, women are here. We have it, you know, people thought Hillary Clinton was going to become president. You had Barack Obama having his 2 terms as US president. So you have this idea of things politically, culturally looked quite positive. It looked like the goodies will win. You know, the baddies are not in positions of power, you know, for kind of putting in that binary framework. And now I think watching it in 2025, you look at the lovely, pure, innocent world that we all lived in then that we didn't even realise we had as we watch, you know, wars rage and, you know, horrific things happening around the planet, and you look at the state of US politics. So I think there's an element of escapism for a lot of young people who have grown up during COVID. Like if you're in your 20s now, COVID took up a large chunk of your school and or college, and the freedom that the girls have in Girls is something that maybe a lot of 20-somethings wish they had, because they don't have it, both like mental freedom and physical freedom and financial freedom. Like we know in Ireland, it's really hard to buy a house if you're any age up to 40 plus, whereas they could afford in girls to rent an apartment in Brooklyn.
Yes.
I don't know how realistic it was essentially, but it seemed like it was more realistic.
It's a really good point. It does feel like things have regressed a lot in the last few years, even alone. So I can see why, it seems like a happier time, and a time of escapism. It's a series of escapism in a lot of ways for Gen Z, I suppose.
And do you remember a lot of the chat around the time of girls around body image and around how people talked about Lena Dunham, how she looked on screen?
Yes, and there's even actually watching the pilot, there's a scene in that where Adam, her disgusting boyfriend / situationship man, mentions something about her. He asks why she got her tattoos, and she explains that she was heavier, she put on weight in her teens, and he says something along the lines of, "You're not that fat anymore, you get them lasered off." And it's just kind of like, oh, right. But it felt like she was making a point at the same time by writing in a scene like that.
Definitely.
Because Hannah seems to be kind of still like she takes it as a compliment, whereas it's really striking watching it back now and going, why would she let him say that? But again, she's in her 20s. It's very much a time where you want to be accepted and want to be loved. So it's a clever way of kind of, I suppose, talking about that sort of stuff.
Definitely, that like the kind of currency she gets from a really awful character, Adam, who's played by Adam Driver, who went on to have an absolutely massive career, including starring in the Star Wars franchise. The currency that she gets from him loving her, it's like she's seeking that all the time because she needs that validation. But at the same time, she does have this sense of self-confidence and self-love that I actually think people were really confronted by. Like they couldn't believe that a woman on screen who quote unquote looked like her, i.e. looked like any normal woman, but didn't look like some blonde bombshell or whatever, that she dared to find herself attractive or sexual. I feel like that was something people couldn't get their head around, which is completely at odds to reality, because that's just the case in reality. And I think too much the new series from Lena Dunham leans into that too, by like not making body image or Jess's body factor of anything. She's just loved for who she is, just like in real life. And I think that's really confronting for people. They just hate seeing women push past those barriers. But I do think that millennials we've kind of lived through a lot of diet culture, lived through a lot of, negativity around women's bodies. I've tried to push through that. There was kind of the body positive era. That's now being pushed back on in the Ozempic era. And I do wonder if Gen Z are looking at all of that happening, seeing what we experienced, not wanting that, seeing the Ozempic era, not necessarily wanting that, and finding something fresher in girls. Not that I think it's like the bastion of perfection on this issue. But like you were saying there, I think that was a good example of how it did introduce a discussion.
Absolutely. It did start a lot of discussions. The question is, though, will we be revisiting Girls in another new series and just like that it does with Sex and the City in 15, 20 years? Would you watch it?
Oh, God. I'd probably watch it out of curiosity, but I mean, I really don't think... I think I'm a big fan of leaving things as they are. If something's perfection or if it's good... Don't drag it out. Like by the end of season 6 or 6 seasons of Girls, by the end of season 6, I was not as interested as I was in season 1.
Yeah.
So no, I wouldn't really watch. I wouldn't be into it just like that remake. Would you?
No, I don't think so. I kind of feel the same. I think you should leave the past in the past, and just like that is proven. Even though I cannot stop watching it, it's absolutely ridiculous.
Yes, friend of the pod, Jen Gannon, said it's like a gas leak of a show, which I think describes exactly the hallucinatory aspect of it. But before we move to your top 5 series about female friendship, can I give you a bit of a spoiler about what happens to the girls in the future?
Yeah, please do.
Because all of this, to kind of wind it all up, I think there are many reasons why Gen Z are really into girls, and part of it also is maybe they're not getting enough female fronted series that are giving them kind of interesting things on screen. But Lena Dunham was asked in an interview about her predictions for the future. She said, this is what she said all the characters would be up to. Shoshana was married to, then divorced from the mayor of New York City. She runs an athleisure startup that's zero waste. Marnie, Marnie's on her 3rd marriage. She still sings, but I think Marnie really needs to take it to Sex and Love Addicts Anonymous. Jessa is unvaccinated and lives on a boat in Croatia. Adam is a cult theatre actor and he's probably living in Berlin. Ray is still, good old Ray. Ray is still on City Council and running his coffee shop and doing better than anyone. Elijah is the fourth lead on a sitcom, making a good amount of money and still looking for love in all the wrong places. We didn't really get into it, but Adam was the boyfriend, Ray was their friend and sometimes boyfriend of some of the characters, and Elijah was Lena's ex-boyfriend who turned out to be gay. So those are the guys that kind of made up the bulk of it. But what do you reckon Lena's prediction is for Hannah Horvath? What do you think she's
no
up to?
idea. Is she still in New York even?
She teaches at Bard. She loves raising her son and probably has a girlfriend who's a chef. And she's less obsessed with being famous. That is where I feel she would land. So there we go. Let us know your thoughts on girls at Get Around to It Pod on Instagram. Now, before we wind up, please tell us what your top 5 series about female friendship are, Laura.
Yeah, I do love a top 5, and I know I'm inevitably going to leave something out here, so forgive me. But in terms of my own taste, I have to put Sex and the City in there at number 5. Even though we've just spoken about how unrelatable it was, it's just a show that I will watch every single time it's on. It was just such a defining TV show for a generation, wasn't it? It was just,
completely. Yeah.
one of those shows. And if a girl growing up in Blanchardstown can be entertained by these fancy ladies in New York, that says it all.
Love it.
I will still never own or want to own a pair of Jimmy Choos or Louboutins, though. Number 4, Golden Girls, a classic.
Oh.
I think what I love about this, even as a kid watching it, and obviously I didn't watch it religiously as a kid, but it was on and I've kind of dipped in and out of it over the years. It's such a beautiful portrayal of female friendship in older ladies, even though they weren't.
Were they like 45, 50?
I think they're meant to
With
be
blue rinses.
50 or maybe even 60 is pushing it, but
Yeah.
it's just one of those American, so many American sitcoms from the 80s and 90s. It's just a real comfort blanket of a show. Number 3, Midge and Susie in The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel. I think we've spoken about this before. You haven't seen it, right? I keep pushing you to try and watch it.
You do, because I love the fashion. I love that era. I watched a couple of episodes. I thought they were lovely. I just didn't get around to watching anymore.
Okay.
But I still thought it was really
on your
good.
to-do
Yeah,
list.
it is on my to-do list. Yeah.
Okay, it's a show that I definitely think more people need to watch. It's just brilliant, especially the first 2 seasons. I think it drops off a little in quality after that. But Rachel Brosnahan plays this, I suppose, wealthy, really privileged housewife in Manhattan in the late 1950s, and she inadvertently embarks on a stand-up comedy career. And Susie is the woman who runs the comedy club in the East Village, or I think in New York. She's this really hard-headed, kind of tough woman, and she becomes Midge's manager. And it's really entertaining and touching at times to see how their friendship develops over the course of the seasons. Number 2, Broad City. Are you a fan?
Yeah, I haven't watched all of it at all, but any episodes I watched, I really liked. And, phrases like, in the club, we all fam, they're just really hilarious and kind of a bit absurd and a bit silly. And I think that actually appeals to me sometimes a bit more than like the really serious stuff.
Absolutely. It's just so entertaining. It's one of those shows that I would just happily, again, watch over and over again. I adore I adore the dynamic between Abby and Alana, who are basically 2 best friends navigating life in New York. It's so funny how many of these series are set in New York, isn't it?
I know.
There's something about New York that really lends itself to obviously friendship-driven sitcoms, even Friends.
You can do anything. I think that's that idea of like in New York, you can do anything and be anything you want, and so it's a great container for like possibility or whatever. And maybe in a way, too much is the kind of British. It has that idea of like people in New York think London offers all that, whereas we're like, it's just London next door.
That's true, very true.
Yeah.
But yeah, Broad City is amazing. Abby is this sort, I suppose, slightly more neurotic foil to Ilana's kind of absurd, like you said, free spirit. But it's just laugh out loud funny. I absolutely love it. Number 1, it was really tough to choose between this and Broad City, but Pen 15 is one of my favourite sitcoms of the last 10 years, and I never hear anyone talking about it. So please give it a go.
Yeah.
I'm sure it's on some streaming service somewhere. Maya Erskine and Anna Kunkel play fictionalised middle school versions of themselves. So it's not even like it's a high school comedy, or it's not a kid comedy, kid-based comedy. It's kind of that awkward in-between stage of being a kid and an adult. So the fact that they're playing versions of themselves at that age is hilarious in itself. Maya even has big train track braces. I think they both do, actually.
They do, yeah.
Yeah, and it's so sweet and it's cringy and it's really moving in terms of the themes and the storylines they explore, actually, about growing up and having parents who divorce and stuff like that. But it's so funny, and if you've seen it, Shillelagh Pompano, you'll know what I'm talking about. If you haven't seen it, please do watch it.
I snorted there because it's very funny. Great. So where can people watch Pen 15? Is it still
I
still
think
available?
it's probably streaming online somewhere.
Yeah.
If it's not, then we need to start a campaign.
I think,
and
I
write
agree.
to somebody in power to get it on Irish streaming services.
Yeah, that's the thing, isn't it? That there can be so many great series, but you might not always get to watch them because of the way things work. So if you spot it on DVD, pick it up.
So that's all for it on this special deep dive episode of Get Around to It. And thanks for listening. And if you enjoyed what you heard, please don't forget to follow us on Instagram at Get Around to a Pod, and like, share and review this podcast, because that really helps.
Definitely do. Please spread the word with any of your pals, family members, pets who might be curious culture fans. And if you're an art maker or culture creator, we'd love to hear from you. Drop us a mail at gettoaroundtoitpod@gmail.com. And don't forget to check out our other episodes as well in the feed.
Yeah, and thanks again so much for listening, and to our engineer Rory Mulligan and everyone at TU Dublin for the use of this studio space.
And big thanks to Landlovers for providing us with their theme music, Cinema Bell, from their album Confidence. We'll see you next time.